Let's be real, finding a lump in your breast is scary. It's one of those moments that just stops you in your tracks. But here's some reassuring news. Most of these lumps are actually benign. So today, we're going to pull back the curtain on 3 of the most common types. We'll get into how they feel, why they act the way they do, and what the experts who diagnose them are actually seeing. All right, let's jump in.
So, you found a lump. Your mind immediately starts racing, right? Well, that discovery is really just the first step on a diagnostic journey. It's a process designed to figure out exactly what's going on, and we're going to walk through that journey together today.
Okay, let's start with this single most important fact. The overwhelming majority of breast lumps are not cancer. They're benign. But, and this is a big but, telling them apart is absolutely crucial. Why? Because a benign lump and a malignant one can sometimes feel pretty similar. Getting that precise diagnosis is everything. It's the only real way to get peace of mind and make sure you're getting the right care. First step in our case files is the most common benign breast tumor of them all, the fibroadenoma. And its nickname, the rubbery mobile mass, tells you almost everything you need to know about how it feels. So who gets these? Typically, it's younger women, usually in their 20s and 30s, and the classic description is a single, painless lump that feels firm, almost like a rubber ball, and you can move it around easily under the skin. Now, here's a huge clue to their nature. They're connected to hormones. They can actually get bigger during pregnancy or certain times in the menstrual cycle, and then shrink or even calcify after menopause.
We know how it feels to the touch, but what is it, really? To answer that, we have to see what a pathologist sees, both with the naked eye and, of course, under the microscope. To the naked eye, it looks very well-behaved. It's a distinct, firm, round mass that's clearly separate from all the tissue around it. But the real story, as always, is what you see microscopically. It has what pathologists call a biphasic structure. That just means it's made of 2 parts. Fibrous connective tissue, that's the fibro part, and glandular tissue, the adenomal part. And that dense fibrous tissue, that is exactly what gives the tumor its firm, rubbery feel. It's a perfect link between what's happening on a cellular level and what a patient feels.
Okay, let's move on to our second case. This one is called a phyllodes tumor. Now, these are way less common than fibroadenomas, but their defining feature is something you can't ignore. They tend to grow, and sometimes they grow fast. Clinically, the big red flag for a phyllodes tumor is change. A patient might say, you know, I've had this lump for a while, and it never bothered me, but all of a sudden it started growing. And often it grows very quickly. That rapid enlargement is the key sign that tells a doctor, okay, we need to take a much closer look at this. You know, the name itself gives us a fantastic clue about what this thing looks like. Phyllodes actually comes from the Greek word for leaf, and trust me, once you see it under the microscope, the name makes perfect sense. And here it is. Under the microscope, the key difference from a fibroadenoma is that the connective tissue, what we call the stroma, is way more cellular and abundant. All these extra cells in the stroma push into the glandular parts of the tumor, creating these incredible, intricate structures that look just like the veins in a leaf. It's pretty amazing to see.
So let's put these 2 side by side because this is so important. Both have that mix of fibrous and glandular tissue, right? But the phyllodes tumor has that much more cellular stroma. That cellularity is basically the engine behind its rapid growth. And it's also why, and this is the critical part, while most are benign, they have a rare but real potential to become malignant. This is exactly why telling them apart is not just academic, it's clinically vital. All right, on to our third and final case, the intraductal papilloma. And this one is a bit of a curveball because for many people, the first sign isn't a lump that you can feel at all. This quote really says it all. The classic and often the most alarming symptom of an intraductal papilloma is totally unexpected nipple discharge. It might be a clear, watery fluid, or it can be bloody, which, as you can imagine, is pretty concerning to discover.
So this is something we see most often in premenopausal women. And while that discharge is the main event, sometimes a very small lump can be felt right underneath the areola. In some rare cases, it can even cause the nipple to pull inward a bit.
And the pathology here explains the symptoms perfectly. What we're actually looking at is a tiny, benign growth, a papilloma, that forms inside one of the milk ducts, usually right behind the nipple. Microscopically, you see these delicate, finger-like branches growing into the open space of the duct. Because this little growth is fragile and it's sitting right there in the duct system, it can bleed or just leak fluid, which then travels right out of the nipple. It's a direct cause and effect.
So we've got our rubbery mass, our fast-growing leafy tumor, and a tiny growth inside a duct. They're all benign, but you can see how different they are. So let's zoom out for a second and talk about why telling them apart is so important. This right here is the heart of the matter. A new lump is just a lump. It doesn't have a label. And because a dangerous cancer can show up in the exact same way as a totally harmless fibroadenoma as a palpable mass, you simply cannot rely on feel alone. You have to get a definitive answer.
And this is how that definitive answer is reached. It's a pretty standard 3-step process. It all starts with a clinical exam and talking through your history. Step 2 is imaging, things like a mammogram or ultrasound to get a better look. But the final, gold standard answer comes from step 3, a biopsy. Looking at a small piece of the actual tissue under a microscope is the only way to know for sure what's going on.
So, to wrap this all up, here's a really simple way to keep these 3 straight in your head. The fibroadenoma, that's your classic, mobile, rubbery mass. The phyllodes tumor, think of it as the rapidly growing cousin with that leaf-like structure. And the intraductal papilloma, that's the one that makes its presence known not with a big lump, but with nipple discharge. At the end of the day, being able to connect a physical symptom to what's actually happening inside your body is what turns fear into understanding. Knowing why a lump feels rubbery or why discharge is happening, that's powerful. It's the first and most important step toward getting the right care and, just as importantly, getting some peace of mind. What other medical puzzles do you think we should try to solve next?